Antonio Nicaso, Canada. A best-selling author, internationally recognized expert on organized crime, author of more than 30 books on criminal organizations. Professor Antonio is a regular consultant to governments and law enforcement agencies around the world. And the first question is criminalization of society. Criminalization always occurs, self-sufficient organization of people with their own rules, when states manifest failure to cope with extreme situation in the face of global threats. In turn, entities establish on their own without taking into account state interests, and other people tend to become criminalized and or regarded as such. And I give the floor to Professor Antonio Nicaso.
So, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on a topic of great concern. As you say, Costantino, mobsters usually try to take advantage of social hardship and economic difficulties. Let's take the example of the Russian mafia, a kind of evolution of the Vori Zakonia. The mafia that we know and study today started with the faulty transition from Soviet planning economy to market economy. The country did not have a system that clearly defined the property rights, an effective court system, and a credible police force, which created a demand for private protection. As Federico Varese underlined in his important study on the Russian mafia, the powerful lobby groups that developed after the collapse of the Soviet economic system were successful in obtaining a favored distribution of assets and tax exemption. The imperfect transition from state-run to market economy generated the criminal opportunity, including incentives to acquire steal assets, corrupt officials, evade taxes, illegal export capital, and launder money. Now, something similar happened in Sicily, where the abolition of feudalism and widespread introduction of private property rights generated the fear of losing property and being cheated. As a result, the demand for protection increased. So people trained in the use of violence took advantage of the situation by providing private protection. More precisely, the underworld exploits any economic market that the upper world is unwilling or unable to govern. Fundamentally, mafia and mafia-like organizations seek to play a role similar to a state and regulate the governed, unregulated, and deregulated markets. Now, the next step for mafia-like criminal organization is to provide governance, which means collecting debts, settling business disputes, helping businessmen obtaining special credits, providing protection, and guaranteeing property rights. Criminal protection involves the protection against competitors or business rivals. That is what distinguishes mafia-like criminal organizations from producers and providers of legal and illegal goods and services. The current risk, and I will explain later this aspect in my second intervention, during the time of coronavirus, is that organized crime will take advantage of the lack and delay of state intervention. They are capable to do so because they belong to a class of their own with different goals and strategies, capable to adapt to any situation and to relate to any strata of society, particularly to the elite decision makers. To make way into the legitimate economy, organized crime groups require relationships with officials in the economic and political sphere, thus cultivating a network of opportunity. So this special form of organized crime sees no geographic, legal, economic, or moral boundary. The key to understand how mafia-like criminal groups achieve their level of power, money, and authority is the fact that they are capable of building strategic networks with the people of power and influence. They are lawyers, judges, accountants, brokers, bankers, bureaucrats, politicians, police officers, judges, labor union representatives. Also, mafia and mafia-like criminal groups are less feasible and more business-oriented, more inclined to use corruption than guns.
The second question for the discussion, as you remember, is criminalization ways, how it may take place. What are the new ways of the emergence of organized crime? Is it true that crime is taking over today? And what forms of crime might still appear after post-epidemic period? So please, dear Professor Antonio Nicaso, you know much about our future. We believe it.
Okay, we haven't never seen a crisis like this in living memory. So the COVID-19 is having a significant impact on the economy and is influencing and shaping organized crime as well. In other words, when the economy collapses or is in a shutdown, organized crime also suffers. So the lockdown of the public movement and the sealing of borders have had an immediate impact on certain criminal activity, which have since slowed or stopped. Many countries have seen a drop-off in crime like murders, with some exception. In Mexico, for example, in March, last March, there have been 2,500 murders. But many countries have seen a drop-off in crimes like murders, extortion, prostitution, illegal betting, human trafficking. Getting migrants across borders have become far more difficult amid increased scrutiny and lack of human activity. But Europol warned that the criminals were rearranging people's smuggling routes and finding new ways to lure potential victims. With the business closed, there are fewer places for organized crime to conduct business, no pro sport to gamble on, fewer counterfeit goods coming in from China to sell. Drug producers are having trouble getting imports of chemicals from China. Wuhan is known for its production of chemicals, including the ingredients needed to cook fentanyl or other powerful synthetic opioids. And we know that fentanyl was a product of great demand before actually supplying the United States the consumption of heroin. Then there has been an increase in the price of illegal drugs because not only for lower amount of chemicals coming from China. According to the United Nations Office on Drug and Crimes, cocaine production has been impacted by COVID-19 crisis as producers, especially in Eastern Colombia, are suffering from a shortage of gasoline, which was previously smuggled from Venezuela and is essential in cocaine production. In many countries, gangs and criminals organizations have watched over specific neighborhoods, telling people to stay indoors, enforcing the quarantine. According to Inside Crime in Venezuela, pro-government armed group known as colectivos were the ones to announce the very first lockdown measure in certain areas, even before the government or healthcare service. In Mexico and Italy, criminal groups or associates have distributed food of essential items. In Mexico, the daughter of El Chapo is distributing a product with the logo of his father, with the photo of his father on the package. So those are few examples of the increased type of governance taking advantage of the absence of delays of state intervention. Many criminal organizations have started selling personal protective items, illicit medicine. They try to find a way. For example, in order to sell in drugs, some criminal organizations have infiltrated their men into essential services, such as Uber. Through drivers connected to this important service, it is possible to circumvent the restriction imposed and deliver the drugs at home. We mentioned about another important business is the increase of COVID-19 related phishing scams, whereby cyber criminals have impersonated the trusted source of information, such as the World Health Organization, to spread malware or harvest the personal information. During this period of a coronavirus, computer scams in the form of phishing have increased by 600% worldwide. But there will be more opportunity as the crisis unfolds. Emergency funding issued to help the economic fallout of a pandemic is likely to fuel corruption across Europe. Criminals will find the ways to fraudulently apply for aid. I think, as Oleg mentioned, the risk that many companies may fall into the hand of criminals is very high. Just as there is a high risk that some companies may be taken over by mafia or mafia-like criminal organization nominees. They may offer credit to businessmen on the verge of bankruptcy. It is useful to remind that the mafia and mafia-like criminal organizations are against the state law, but not against the market law. And so just a few businessmen are willing to refuse money in time of need. In many countries, we know drug money has become the oxygen for the legal economy. Just a few other things. Let's take the sample of my native country. History teaches us that the criminal organizations have always benefited from natural disasters, notably the cholera outbreak in Sicily in 1867, in Naples in 1884, as well as the 1908 earthquake in Reggio Calabria and Messina, the earthquake in Campania and Basilicata in 1980, the earthquake in Emilia-Romagna, Abruzzo, Umbria, and Marche, all provide a profitable opportunity for criminals able to put their hand on the stimulus and reconstruction fund. But don't forget, drug money worth billions of dollars helped some banks avoid bankruptcy during the financial crisis of 2008. This was the only liquid investment capital available at that time. Now, criminals are rapacious, like a vulture, and resilient. They are capable to adapt to any circumstances. An old Sicilian proverb perfectly describes this characteristic. Bend down the rush until the flood has passed. So we must learn from the past, and I believe there is an urgence to introduce emergency measures and to also focus on undocumented workers, on people in need, on families that struggle. The goal is to maintain social cohesion, but the goal is to avoid that the criminal organization to take advantage again of this opportunity. Thank you.